What is my purpose? And the questions like these are the questions that we looked at last week as the author of Ecclesiastes, who describes himself as the preacher, or I refer to him as his Hebrew name there of preacher of Koheleth. We'll be talking about Koheleth, who, especially in today's passage, will sound very much like it's Solomon. And people disagree if it's literally the writings of Solomon at the end of his life, looking back at all he's done and wondering, what is the point? I'm not entirely sure if it exactly is Solomon or someone writing in kind of a Solomonic kind of framework. Say a movie that's depicting an American president, but it's not really John F. Kennedy, but he's like John F. Kennedy-like. He's writing in the mode, the appearance of a Solomonic kind of king who's extraordinarily wise, wealthy, and loves pleasure. I think it's all to the point if we ever, in New Heavens and New Earth, actually meet King Solomon, if we run up to him and said, I loved Ecclesiastes. I don't want the embarrassment of you going, what? No, I didn't write that. Who knows? So we looked last week at this idea of vanity or meaninglessness or fleeting, that all the things in this world seem to be fleeting, running away, momentary. What meaning can we actually find? Well, we're going to look at Ecclesiastes 2 as Koheleth really endeavors to push that further. Can I actually find meaning around me in life? And what are the areas he'll investigate for meaning? So follow along with me here in your copy of the scriptures or the words on the screen of Ecclesiastes 2. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. Behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad. And of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens, parks, planted them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great, surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was the reward for all my toil. I considered all that my hands had done, the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind. There's nothing to be gained under the sun. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly, for what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there's more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived the same event happens to all of them. I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? I said in my heart, this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all what have been long forgotten. How the wise dies, just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. All is vanity and a striving after wind. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity, a great evil. What is a man from all the toil and striving of heart which with he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. There's nothing better for a person than he should eat and drink, find enjoyment in his toil. It's also myself in the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. It's the word of the Lord. People have often said, money can't buy happiness. I think there's a lot of rich people in the world, though, who hear those words, money can't buy happiness, and say, that actually kind of sounds like a poor person making excuses. It's a question of how much money can buy how much happiness, right? I mean, I think a lot of people at their heart believe that, dismiss the claim that money can't buy happiness because they look at their lives and say, well, got a good degree of happiness and a good degree of money. I'm sure I can have a good degree of happiness in my life. I mean, I think, though, what starts to, I think, truly prove the fact that money can't buy happiness is the fact that there seems to be no end of earning money. I mean, think of someone like a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk. I don't know if you've seen videos trying to proportionally give account of their net worth, like starting with a grain of rice equaling a net worth of $100,000. And you start zeroing out to in different celebrities and their net worth just by grains of rice. And when you get up to someone like Bezos, his net worth is just like several giant bags of rice just dumped out onto the ground. And it's still continuing to go up every time you realize you're out of toilet paper and need it delivered by drone to your house. He gets a little bit more rice in his pile. But what I ask, why not hang it all up? Why not just say, he's in his 50s, I think. How many more years does he have to use up the rest of that money? Because at a certain point, he's going to, as Koheleth figures out, pass away. And what will he do with all that money? But he keeps earning and keeps earning and earning because obviously something in there is not enough. There's something that is not met its fill. Even the richest and wealthiest people continually to pour into that pot. And if you think that money will someday buy you happiness, realize the richest of people who you will never, ever, in your wildest dreams, come close to even a few decimal places of their net worth, they're still earning money. So why do you think you'll get to a place where you can stop? Don't believe me? Don't worry. There's a wise person in the Bible who's tried it himself. Let's try to take Koheleth's word for it. And maybe he's found the conclusion that Bezos or Musk have not found yet. He's done this not just to make a company. Koheleth is not trying to make a company or provide a service. He is out to investigate. He is investigating wealth. He is investigating pleasure. He's investigating wine. He's investigating wisdom to find not just simply happiness, but meaning. Can I find purpose, significance in my life? So he goes on this quest. That's what the end of chapter 1 really is let me figure out life. And so he looks for this quest of meaning in all these different avenues. But as we heard, he found himself a frustrating conclusion in his quest. And resolves here at the end with a gift of God's pleasure. And what the true gift of God's pleasure and how it is found. So first, in this quest for pleasure, quest for meaning, he looks first to pleasure. He looks at laughter, said it's madness, and of pleasure. What use is it? And he has found that conclusion because he has gone on this giant quest, holding nothing back. For it says, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. Kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. His wealth does provide pleasure. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. He finds pleasure, but can he find meaning? What are the pleasures he jumps into? He looks at laughter, wine, his real estate, his garden, his music, and sex. He talks about wine and filling his heart, cheering his body, literally just making his body glad and warmth by the fruit of the vine. He says, still guiding me by wisdom, like I'm still trying to keep a sober level about so I can use my wise faculties here. It kind of sounds like you're protesting a little bit too much. You probably had a little bit more than what is wise, Koheleth. And he also talks about his great houses, his big, giant palaces. We're starting to get perhaps into some areas that we ourselves might envy ourselves. He talks about these great big gardens and the produce he gets from these gardens. Emma and I, on our deck, as you probably hear every May, we start putting out little flower pots and little herb gardens. We tried cilantro this time, and it is growing like a weed, which is great. But if you guys need any cilantro, let me know, because I'm going to have my fill of it soon. But it is so small, so humble, so insignificant compared to the gardens that Koheleth rises up and is able to. He talks about all these different fruits he has. The main source of sweetness, the sweet deliciousness of it all. The fruit of the vine that he can have pressed into wine for him to drink, all surrounded by these singers. Remember, before recorded music, you couldn't get an album, you couldn't get a CD or stream music or whatever. The only way you could get music is having live music. Live music is the only music that exists. So he has all these vocalists surrounding him, and concubines, which is just a nice, cozy biblical word for he has sex from anyone he wants at any point. Every single part of pleasure he wants he can find of wine, home, music, sex, without any limit to it. No limit. I think if we're being honest, when we think about the big house, the full stomach, the wine, the sex, these are things that maybe in your heart, even though it's church right now, you're probably thinking, that sounds pretty good, if we're being honest. Something I might be envious of. We don't have kings in Jerusalem or royalty or nobles to envy and admire, but we have celebrities who their whole public figure and influence persona exists, so we have something to strive after? A dream to chase? Someday I can be like them and have all the pleasures that they seem to broadcast that they have? Social media itself exists for us to have something to feed our dissatisfaction, to broadcast the small areas of our life that we are satisfied in and promote the dissatisfaction in others. That's maybe not the intent of social media, but it is without a doubt the effect, isn't it? Something to envy and then strive after, a dream to chase to try to get our hands around the pleasures that they have. For right now, I'll live vicariously through them by reading about them, but in my heart, desire it. That is what we see in Koheleth, something that we would desire. If I propose to you Koheleth from thousands and thousands of years ago, we have pretty much as much wealth as he does. Maybe we don't have the large palaces we have, but the ability to travel and move around and walk through palaces is more than even the poorest beggar in his time could do. The accessibility of food and drink and alcohol. I mean, this is Wisconsin. It pours out of everywhere, it seems. Every pore, right? We have as much access, even more than he did. He had, if we're talking about a Solomonic kind of figure who it says had 300 wives, 700 concubines. No, I think that's flipped around. He had access to sex wherever he wanted. Our accessibility of the internet and pornography means we get any kind of enjoyment and pleasure at just a few finger scolds if we desire. We have as much access to pleasure as Koheleth found. Have you found meaning and happiness? Neither has Koheleth. I don't think we need to just take his word for it. I think many of us have walked that line of trying to realize what we are striving after, everything we are seeking out, trying to get our hands around is just a vapor that is escaping out of us, just passing through us. fleeting, empty, momentary. Getting to the weekend so you can relax with friends and relax and get too drunk, but then that morning you wake up as the alcohol is leaving your body, leaving you dehydrated and empty. Being frustrated that you've drained all the dopamine of your favorite song after just hitting replay, repeat on it until it loses all of its joy and you need to find a new song that really pleases you again. The sexual encounter that just leaves you feeling empty or even shameful. Thinking that this one more opportunity to fulfill my sexual longings and realizing it doesn't. All of these things, if we make this our aim and our meaning, will leave us like he describes, chasing after the wind. What is that? Chasing after the wind. But it's like herding cats. This idea of just trying to get something done that is impossible, pursuing something that is unable to be caught. A dog who chases cars will never be able to catch up to it, wouldn't even know what to do with it if it found it. That is what we are, trying to chase meaning via pleasure. We'll never find it. But try and try we might do. Try and try do the wealthy as well. And still they can't find it. And so he finds himself at the end. I considered all that my hands had done, the toil I had expended doing it, and behold, all was vanity, fleeting, meaningless, empty, a striving after the wind, nothing to be gained under the sun. It's that picture of blowing soap bubbles in the air and trying to catch your hands in it. That is what trying to find meaning in pleasure is. Perhaps, as I said, we understand wealth can't buy happiness. So maybe that whole discourse I just said, yes, we all take for granted. But what about being a truly wise person? Maybe wisdom will be able to show me, what pleasure and how much wisdom in pleasure shows you what? Moderation, right? How to keep your wits about you, how to enjoy stuff to the appropriate and perhaps godly degree of pleasure, right? Wisdom should be able to help us. After all, if this is a Solomonic kind of figure, what wisdom? That is his fame and what he's famous for. So he says, I turned to consider all my wisdom and madness. I saw there's more gain in wisdom than folly, as there's more gain in light than in darkness. It's this is elementary. You don't have to be wise to know it's better to be wise than a fool, right? He's saying, I don't need to explain this part, right? That's a good thing. Brings light to our eyes, a way to walk. He says, the wise person has eyes to see. The fool, he doesn't even say the fool is blind. The fool is just in darkness, just walking around, walking into walls. Like a disconnected controller, having your figure just kind of run into the walls is the foolish person. If I'm wise, I'll live a good life with that. And I won't find disappointment because wisdom will keep me from disappointment. If I make foolish choices, I'll end up in the gutter. I will leave two different lives. Wise life, good. Foolish life, bad. Right? Simple. But what does Koheleth also find out? The same event happens to all of them. Or other ways of translating that, the same fate befalls them. They meet their same end. They might have different little stories, little different events, different experiences in their life, the wise and the fool. But every one of them has the same fate, death. The wise and the fool, for all your wisdom, the best health care, the best retirement plan, the best way to keep your body as healthy and long-lasting as possible, the best family that loves you and takes care of you into old age, all things set into the right place, a life lived faithfully. You will one day, for all those good and wise decisions, have a body that is placed onto a cold table and wheeled down to the hospital morgue, where you'll be placed on the same spot next to the tragic drug addict who spent their life in darkness. Just a foot away from that person. Different lives. Wisdom and foolishness. Your roads ending in the same cold, clinically lit place. Wisdom shows us that. The same event happens to us all. That's why he seems to say, the more wisdom you perceive, the more miserable you become. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. The more wise you become, the more you realize how little control you have of your life. After all, we all end up in the grave at some point. So he says, it's all meaningless. All fleeting. For all my wisdom will one day leave me as my brain deteriorates, my bodily functions cease, and I die, and I am placed in the same grave with the fool. It's the great frustration that ends his quest, doesn't it? His quest for meaning gets frustrated once he realizes, oh yeah, death is unavoidable. I can't cheat my way out of death. It spoils it all, spoils all the fun. It spoils all the pleasure. It spoils all the wisdom. Death. And so he hates all his toil. He said, I hated my life. I hated my toil for all these things that I had worked for. I have to leave it to someone else? This also is vanity. You can almost hear this guy saying, I've built all these gardens. I have all these beautiful singers around me and all this great wine, this amazing cellar that is filled with the best wine in all the land, these beautiful pools and these gardens. And I'm wise too. Like, people respect my decisions and my choices. And then what happens? I have to leave it to my idiot son. And, I kept trying to find, what's a good kind of parallel to it? And I think actually the parallel that is drawn naturally out of Scripture. Again, if this is a Solomon-like figure, who was Solomon's son but a complete dolt who ruined everything Solomon had done? Solomon brought about the golden age of the Israelite kingdom, where he brought in all these other nations and all these other kings and queens from the nations around and be like, this is amazing. Look how powerful and strong and mighty Israel is and how wise their king is. And then Solomon dies along with the fool, and his son Rehoboam has the same wise advisors that Solomon had. These aged, men with big long beards and wise saints who had learned next to the wise Solomon. And Rehoboam's in a situation that needs some good diplomacy. A person who had been exiled and ran away from Solomon is now asking to come back in and having some clemency. And so his wise advisors were like, do the diplomatic, do the wise option, be kind, be respectful. Who does Rehoboam listen to? But his bros, his drinking buddies, who just tell him, hey, when that guy comes, say, my little finger is bigger than your thighs. My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. Dad disciplined you with whips, I'll whip you with scorpions. It is as childish, immature, and crass as you probably think it is. He didn't listen to the wise. And what happens? But the kingdom of Israel and all of its height of its glory gets divided. You've lost it all that his late father had left behind. Death frustrates all that we do in our life because we have to leave it to our idiot kid. Or maybe it's not quite as simple as that. It just means that all that you do, someone else will have to take care of it. That they didn't work from it. You have to pass it on. You can't take it with you into the next life. That succession does not always lead to success, does it? How quickly one fool can destroy the wise legacy of a wise man. And so all things are like that striving after wind, trying to grab something that is momentary and fleeting. You can get your hands around the bubble for a barely even scientifically proven moment before it pops. The popping of that bubble in the air is a symbol of our own death, our own life as well. It's vain, it's empty. And maybe right now in your life you may feel like you are chasing that wind, chasing after that wind, trying to get your hands around something you cannot catch up. And then maybe if you do have it, you might start to realize that for moments your life will end and you will not have that forever. Perhaps the plan of success, it's not even yours or your dream of the wind you're chasing is not the plan you've set up, but your parents. That maybe one day I can prove the sacrifices they've made worthwhile. That my own success will bring, happiness to them, and they'll be grateful and honored by all they've done and all that I'm living for. But realize that one day they'll pass all off too. Then who are you striving for? Well, likely then you might be then striving, all your strivings, all your efforts will be then transferred to the kids, right? But then coalesce fear comes back. All children with us excluded. What if my kids are idiots? What if they spoil all I've done, all that I've worked for? What if they're an utter fool? What does that do for all my striving, all my work? That if I leave it to them, what does that mean? Even if they are the wisest that they could be, all the work I've done, even for that, all that wisdom, they will pass away too. Every generation, a generation comes, a generation goes. What meaning can we find if it's just in the toil that we do, the wisdom that we seek out? If that is alone our motivation, we cannot truly catch it. That death renders all things meaningless. And so we're often left with, well, just make the best meaning you can. But even that meaning that we would construct in our lives, that meaning is fleeting too. That meaning is momentary. It's frustrating, isn't it? Many of you may feel frustrated right now. To think that if our existence, our purpose is, really to use and enjoy the ends that we have, but instead, Koheleth then turns for the first time in Ecclesiastes, he mentions the name of God. God, he mentions God here. For the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom, knowledge, joy, but to the sinner, he has also given the business of gathering collected only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. He says, essentially, in verse 24, just enjoy what God has given you. Eat and drink. Eat and drink and find enjoyment in your toil. Enjoy what you can. It's fleeting. It's for a moment, but it comes from the hand of God. So good. Enjoy it. But I encourage you to think that this is not just, well, what can you do? Just enjoy the happy times when they're here. Try to look around and acknowledge these are the good old days when you're actually in them. But I encourage us to think that if it's God who's the one giving us pleasure, understand that that's who we're enjoying them for. That true wisdom, if we truly understand what wisdom is not just making the most financially secure choice. Wisdom is not making the choice that sees down the road the best. Wisdom is not the choice that does the best for all people. Wisdom is the choice that realizes that all things, all wisdom even, is according to God's wisdom. Wisdom is trying to understand that all things come from His hand and all things are for His pleasure. True wisdom is working and toiling for the pleasure of God, knowing that every little bit of enjoyment, every little bit of pleasure, every delicious sip of wine, every beautiful song in the world, embrace with a husband or wife is a beautiful thing that God has given from His hand. So enjoy it, and that is right, and it's glorifying to Him. He gave you ears to hear and understand music, not just to hear vibrations, but understand melody and richness. What a gift that is. So seek His wisdom. Seek that it all is pouring out from His generous hand. As Solomon says in Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fear God, and all His wisdom and understanding will follow. So that motivates us in what we do in this life, but that still doesn't solve that great frustration. Koheleth is saying, just enjoy the things that God has given you. And I think we can take great joy in that. That even if it's a fleeting moment, a friendship, a family member that's only with us for a short time, be grateful for what God has given. That's wisdom. But that still doesn't deal with the frustration that we have here of death. Can I still find meaning if all these events are fleeting? Death, the problem of death means that all things lose their meaning. But understand that God sent a greater gift, not of wine or sex or gardens or palaces. But Jesus Himself left His palace in heaven to come down to earth. That gave us not a cup of the greatest wine, but gave out His blood. And that is the cup that we drink at the Lord's Supper for our salvation. And what is the hope that we have in Jesus Christ? And the meaning that we have is that He has frustrated death Himself. By Jesus rising from the dead, He has come into that great frustration of all meaning and conquered that. And so what our life means then is looking ahead to our resurrection because of what Jesus has done for our sin. Our selfish pursuit of pleasure, our selfish desire to build up wise and perfect lives and build up monuments to our memory so that our names will be great instead of giving honor to the King of all kings. That's why Christ came to die, but not a death of frustration that ended all meaning to his life, but brought the greatest meaning of freedom from sin and freedom from death itself. So when you look forward to the end of your life, you are not looking forward to the end of all your meaning, but the entrance to what your life really was all for. To rise again in the hope of the resurrection brought to us by Jesus Christ. That Jesus' death and resurrection ends the frustration of death and instead sees the true meaning of living as sons of God. That gift that Christ gives to you is not so that you would squander that blessing, but enjoy richly with it. I want to leave us kind of with this illustration, I think, of the Egyptians that I find fascinating. The kind of comedic history show with Philomena Kunk, I don't know if you've seen that. She quotes, "The Egyptians believed the most significant thing you could do was die," which is hilarious because that's the whole point of what the pyramids were, the embalming, the mummification was, at your death, there's so much weight and significance put in your death. Why? What did they build all these pyramids for, these great empty cavernous rooms? What are the point of those? As ways of erecting monuments to their lives and being able to fill them with their treasures so they could bring with them all these great stuff that they had. That they were frustrated by death and that you couldn't bring your treasures with you. So everything they did was try to take it with you. Bring it along with you. Take it with you into the next life. But the great irony of all that is, of all the mummies and all that they had, all those great pharaohs and the storing up their treasures, that they don't get to bring them into the afterlife. Their children don't get to bring them into the afterlife. Their children's children's children's, even their own people, the people of Egypt today, if they want to behold the treasures of their pharaohs, they have to book a flight to Heathrow and then go to the British Museum to pay to get in and see the treasures of their people. Vanity. Just a momentary grasp of the riches. But to hold and to collect on all the meaning, the riches of the grace of Jesus Christ, to hold onto the riches and the blessings and the righteousness of Jesus Christ, you don't need to book a flight to Heathrow and go to the British Museum. It's not going to be found there. You don't need to find it by going to St. Paul's Cathedral in London either. It's found in the gospel. Free gift available for faith by the Holy Spirit, that greatest gift that promises and seals us with the hope of the resurrection. We might not take all the pleasures of this mortal world with us, but we encounter pleasures that are greater, wisdom that far exceeds anything earthly. That is the hope that we have in the resurrection. That death is no longer a frustration, but a momentary pause till we rise again with our Savior. Let's pray.
feel free to take more time to reflect and pray. Whenever you're ready, if you want to stand and join us for these next couple songs.